to people who probably aren't quite on yet, but you know how it is. You know how it is that you schedule it and they start showing up, here and they're kind of like church. Some people come a few minutes before, some people come right about the same time, and then other people coming in a little bit later. And I'm the guy that comes a little bit early. Anyway, here we are this morning at Cornerstone Church, 2207 7th Street, looking at the book of Judges this morning. We've been going through the Bible verse by verse, chapter by chapter now for a few years here on the early morning program. And for those who might be new to us this morning, or you just recently been signing in, I want to let you know is that the Facebook and the YouTube platform has, especially Facebook, okay, has programs over from the last few years, maybe the last, well, let's say, I don't know, let's get technical, year and a half or so. So we started on Facebook Live when we were the last time in the end of the book of Ezekiel. So if you would go to Facebook LV Cornerstone and you would look at our video list and scroll all the way down, you're going to see from Ezekiel, the end of Ezekiel, but probably around chapters in the 30s or the 40s, all the way to the end of the New Testament. And then we started back again with Genesis. So one of these days, hopefully we close the loop, and we're getting closer to closing the loop as we do it verse by verse, chapter by chapter, that we will have on Facebook. And what I'd like to do, one of these days, hopefully I can do it, is download that onto a hard drive so we could have every teaching from the Bible, Genesis 1:1, all the way to Revelation chapter 22. In fact, we were in the 22nd chapter of Revelation on yesterday's Sunday service, which also is on our Facebook page and our YouTube channel. The sound, we're having a little bit of issues. Shelby kind of worked on it a little bit yesterday on the sound of our recording. So you're going to get a little bit of a buzz in the background, not as much as we have been, but I want to tell you is that we are working it. Another thing that I want to tell you, and this is especially because I already told this to our KLYN people, is that starting Sunday, we're going to have a guest evangelist coming through our area that's going to be with us for a whole week. So we're going to have a whole week's worth of revival services with evangelists Joshua and Kristen Humphrey. Look them up on the internet, seeing if you can make time. I would recommend. And the reason we're starting with Joshua on Sunday, because we were originally thinking of doing maybe a longer weekend, like starting Thursday or Friday. But the reason that I bring him in on a Sunday is because most people are used to coming to church on Sunday. So I want to introduce you to him on Sunday and see what you think, to where maybe you won't miss and say later, well, I should have come. Judges chapter 8 is where we are at this morning. And if we look at, and I'm going to take this off of the screen there, if we look at the title over the chapter, it says, Gideon defeats Zebah and Zalmunna. You know Zebah and Zalmunna. They sound like twins. I don't know if they are or not, but I'm just getting ready to get started this morning, and I'm saying there's Zebah and Zalmunna, the twins. And Gideon is going to defeat them. You remember what happened on Friday's program. We were looking at the 7th chapter on Friday's program, and we're looking at Gideon and God paring down his army from 30,000 down to 300. It wasn't good enough that there was 30,000 people. Gideon had gone to some of the tribes, and he had called them. He had blown the trumpet, and he had called them to battle. And 30,000 men show up, and God says, "We got a problem. You have too many." Now, since when is that a problem? Listen, with God, you and God are a majority. If God calls you out to do something and you find out that it's just you, but God has called you and by faith you have responded to the call, you're the majority. And God says, listen, if 32,000 defeat all the Midianites, that's who they were fighting. If we defeat, I'm not going to get the glory for this. And these people are going to go back into their old sinful ways, but I want to prove myself strong. I want to prove, and this is what God was proving. God was proving that he was a God of covenant, and even when the people broke covenant and they cried out to him, he was going to be there and he was going to show himself strong. So, thousands of them go back. And then God says, you still have too many. And then we see is that eventually there was only 300 that were left, and God and Gideon. Remember that Gideon is the partner. Not only Gideon, but the other 300. Let's not discount the other 300. But God and the 301 were enough to overcome the thousands and thousands of Midianites who had come with a couple of other people groups, those that were of the east, and I don't remember what the name, Amalekites or Amorites or one of the Ite brothers had come along with the Midianites. And God had defeated them, and he used Gideon to do it. Well, he used Gideon. But don't forget the supernatural. Don't forget that God is the one that's doing this. What had happened was when Gideon and his 300 men blew the trumpet and broke their vases with the lights inside them, is that it brought confusion upon the Midianites, and the Midianites began to kill one another. Where did that confusion come from? It came from God. And Gideon finishes the job. Now, we have another situation in front of us. We have Zeba and Zalmunna, and I'm calling them the twins. They probably, both of them, they're probably, I'm almost going to guarantee you that these people were descendants of the Nephilim. Just by virtue of their name, I could guess, educated guess for you this morning, because I never want to try to put something into the record that's not there. And forgive me for the times that I do, or you think. Anyway, Zeba and Zalmunna, I'm guessing, are descendants of the Nephilim. They probably were centers. They probably were the twin towers of the basketball team for their local high school, community college, and then went on to bigger and better things. Just kidding. Okay, now you know that I'm really kidding. Now let's go over here. Let's go to the record, and there we have it in front of us. Gideon defeats Zeba and Zalmunna. Now, the men of Ephraim said to him, "Why have you done this to us by not calling us when you went to fight with the Midianites?" And they reprimanded him sharply. He says, "Well, I thought this was about Zeba and Zalmunna. Well, we have some family business that we have to take care of first." The men of Ephraim are not real happy with Gideon. Okay, they're a little they're a little put off this morning because they weren't, invited to the battle. Well, if they would have been invited to the battle, that would have added more numbers. Let's look at it for where we've been. If they would have eventually had to go home, because some way or another God was going to eliminate. Some way or another God was going to get it down. The first rule was, hey, is anybody afraid? Anybody need to go? If you're scared, go home. Thousands go home. The second time he says, take them down to the river and see who laps water with his hand. Keep the ones who put their face in the water and drink straight from the river, from the brook. He says, send them home. And he's only ended up with 300. If Ephraim would have come, it would have taken a lot longer to find out who the 300 were going to be. But they were mighty men of valor. God had tested him, and God had separated him. God has separated away. God had said, listen, these are the men that are ready to fight with you, Gideon, and they did, anyway, you see, I'm thinking I'm there in the middle of the planning of the battle, and I can hear people say, "Well, what do you mean we're going to blow a trumpet and we're going to have a lantern with us and we're going to break the lantern?" And that's the stupidest thing that I've ever heard. Well, the 300 men, they never complained. That's probably part of the reason why we had to pare down from 30,000 down to 300, because there's going to be too many. Well, what if we should do this and what if we should do that? No. This is what God says to do. Let's get it done and let's give him the glory, because that's where the glory belonged. And God was showing himself strong in the midst of a wayward covenant people. They had cried out to him, and God showed up and used Gideon. Interesting story. You can see our full programs starting with about Wednesday of last week when we got into, the 5th or the 6th chapter, talking about Gideon. Now, I want to let you know before we go any further that we have a prayer line open for you till 8 o'clock in the morning at 425-3717. Now the men of Ephraim said to him, "Why have you done this to us by not calling us when we went to fight the Midianites?" And they reprimanded him sharply. So he said to them, "What have I done now in comparison with you? Is not the gleaning of the grapes of Ephraim better than the vintage of Abiezer?" So these guys, they're mad because they weren't there for the fight. Probably these are the type of people that I could suggest to you once in a while, is that they don't want to come, but after the battle is done, then they want to say, "Well, nobody invited us, so we would have been there." And yeah, right, homie. We know how that works. If somebody would have told us, that, well, just a guess. Anyway, they come against Gideon. "Oh, Gideon, you would have called. Why didn't you call us?" And Gideon could have told them, "Well, you guys are a bunch of crybabies. What's your problem? You probably had your mask on and were afraid of the COVID, and that's why you didn't come." And no, he didn't say nothing. What Gideon does is Gideon gives them a humble answer. Instead of inciting, we got a family problem over here. The men of Ephraim are coming up against Gideon and his people. And instead of confronting them, "Hey, we just defeated the Midianites. Who are you guys to?" No. He says to them, "What have I done now in comparison with you?" See, you need to realize. Well, we'll get into that. We won't go to the verse yet. What have I done now in comparison with you? Is not the gleaning of the grapes of Ephraim better than the vintage of Abiezer? The dude's got a pretty good head on his shoulders. He could come back all full of victory and all prideful, and then these guys come against him, and he says, "Watch out, I'll get you too. You're next, man, if you don't." No. He says, "What have I done now in comparison with you? Is not the gleaning of the grapes of Ephraim better than the vintage of Abiezer? God has delivered into your hands the princes of Midian, Oreb and Zeeb. And what was I able to do in comparison with you?" Then their anger toward him subsided when he said that. So Gideon, what he does is he says, "Oh, come on, guys. You guys are always one of the better." See, Ephraim was the brother tribe to Manasseh. Remember, the sons of Joseph were Manasseh and Ephraim. Gideon is of that tribe of Manasseh, and Ephraim, they're kind of like, they have a little bit of better connection than maybe to Gad or maybe to Naphtali or some of the other ones, because they can trace their heritage back to Joseph, who was the guy who saved them when they were in Egypt, blah, 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 all that stuff. And instead of fighting with his brother tribe, he just says, guys, you guys are better than us and always have been better than us. You guys have been winning all the championships. You guys have all the... Is not the gleaning of the grapes of Ephraim better than the vintage of Abiezer? What's that saying? He says, listen, your leftover grapes are better than our top of the line. God has delivered into your hand the princes of Midian, Oreb and Zeeb. And see, that's where we go into a verse at the end of the 7th chapter. Who are these guys? The Ephraim. They captured the two princes of the Midianites, Oreb and Zeeb. They killed Oreb at the rock of Oreb, and Zeeb they killed at the winepress of Zeeb. They pursued Midian and brought the heads of Oreb and Zeeb to Gideon on the other side of the Jordan. So they were part of the battle that was going on. So they were, and Gideon just gives them a little bit of honey, pour a little bit of honey over them and just say, hey, dude, here, a little bit of sugar. Kurt Collins taking us up to weather at 30 minutes after the hour. 18 degrees, our current temperature. Looking for a high today around 50 with mostly sunny skies and northeast wind at 10 miles per hour. And then tomorrow, warming up to 58 degrees with mostly sunny skies and northwest wind at 10. And Wednesday, mostly sunny, high around 59, north wind at 9 miles per hour. So don't look like it's going to be real windy. And we haven't had much of a winter. Tell you the truth, we really haven't. If it wouldn't be for the wind, dang, we'd all have... tan lines or something like that, because it's been pretty. Anyway, good morning. Darlene is with us. Cece, Chana, thank you very much for hanging with us here on our Facebook page. Love you guys very much. Thank you for hanging in there. We're going to go back into our teaching this morning. So he says, God has delivered into your hands the princes of Midian, Oreb, and Zeeb. Listen, we have a common enemy, and it's not one another. Why will we start trouble with people, with family problems, when there's marauders that are trying to beat down the gates? What was I able to do in comparison with you? Then their anger toward him subsided when he said that. The Bible talks about, let's see if I can even... Doesn't the Bible say something about, if you don't remember the exact words, let's see if I can get it. There it is. I just happen to remember. Proverbs 15:1 says, a soft answer turns away wrath, but harsh word stirs up anger. You would think that Gideon was reading Proverbs chapter 15 that morning, even though it hadn't been written yet. Okay, this was before the time of Solomon. A soft answer turns away wrath. And he gives them a soft answer, and they're happy with it. Their anger toward him subsided when he said that. When Gideon came to the Jordan, he and the 300 men who were with him crossed over, exhausted but still in pursuit. So, I have a couple of questions. One specific question that I have, where's the Ephraimites? Where are these guys who have been complaining at the beginning of the chapter saying, hey, you didn't call us to a battle? Well, the battle's not over with. It's just Gideon and his 300. I know that's the way the Lord wanted it, but if these guys were complaining, why don't they come to the battle? Well, nonetheless. Gideon comes to the Jordan. He crosses over into the east side of the Jordan. Now remember this, that there were 3 tribes who had taken up their inheritance on the east side of the Jordan. In fact, if I could pull up your map that we have been looking at a lot over the last few weeks. These are the Manasseh, Gad, and Reuben. Those are the tribes that had their inheritance on the east side of the Jordan. Okay, can we get back into, how's that? Okay. When Gideon came to the Jordan, he and the 300 men who were with him crossed over, exhausted but still in pursuit. Then he said to the men of Succoth, please give loaves of bread to the people who follow me, for they are exhausted, and I am pursuing Zebah and Zalmunna, kings of Midian. Now we know that Oreb and Zeeb had already been taken care of by the Ephraimites. Okay, Andrea, good morning. Tommy, good morning. And he comes to his brothers. First of all, it's the guys from Ephraim that are giving him trouble. Now he comes to Succoth. And this was one of the three tribes that we're looking at. I think it's Gad. These are the Gadites. He says to the men of Succoth, please give loaves of bread to the people who follow me, for they're exhausted, and I am pursuing Zebah and Zalmunna, kings of Midian. So I'm telling you, as Zebah and Zalmunna had been thorns in the side of the men of Succoth, and Gideon was here to take care of business. The leaders of Succoth said, are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna now in your hand, that we should give bread to your army? So Gideon said, for this cause, when the Lord has delivered Zebah and Zalmunna into my hand, then I will tear your flesh with the thorns of the wilderness and with briars. He comes to his brothers. Now listen, these are men of Israel. These are men of the covenant that are having this conversation with one another, this confrontation with one another. And Gideon, who is a nobody from nowhere, shows up, and the men of Succoth say, have you defeated them yet? Yeah, big shot. You don't even have them yet. What makes you think? Well, by faith, Gideon knew that this was God's purpose. God had already promised him the Midianites. And Zebah and Zalmunna were kings, tribal kings in Midian, and he's pursuing them. The leaders of Succoth say, well, I got to see it first. You know who this is, the Thomas syndrome. You know Thomas. Thomas says, unless I see the marks in his hands and in his side, I'm not going to believe that Jesus resurrected from the dead. And this is what the men of Succoth say. Are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna now in your hand? I don't see them chained up. I don't see Zebah and Zalmunna, these big old giants that are in the land, these big old monsters. I don't think you can do it, son. I don't think you can do it. With your 300, I don't think you can do it. Well, God had already proven himself strong. God had already spoken to Gideon. But in Gad, the leaders of Succoth, they don't have any confidence in Gideon and what he's doing. All he asked for is some bread. Remember David. David one time was in the wilderness, and David asked for bread from the priest, and he says, all we have is the holy bread that's in the tabernacle. David says, I'll take that. We need to keep on going. We need to be going after the enemy. At least the priests had enough sense to give them. It cost them their lives. It's another story. We'll be there one of these days. So Gideon said, for this cause, when the Lord has delivered, look at Gideon. Gideon by faith says, we're going to take care of business with Zebah and Zalmunna. And when we do that, we're going to come back and we're going to take care of business with you. Then he went up from there to Penuel and spoke to them in the same way, and the men of Penuel answered him as the men of Succoth had answered. So here's another city in the tribe of Gad that he goes to in Penuel, and they do the same thing to him. Oh, who are you? Yeah, forgive the verbiage I'm going to use. You're just a little punk anyway. What makes you think that you're gonna win? There's probably, and it doesn't tell us, but there's probably a little bit of jealousy going on because Zeba and Zalmunna, along with Oreb and Zeab or whatever the other guy's name is, they've been causing the Gadites problems for years and years. And they hadn't been able to defeat them, and they're jealous because God has anointed Gideon to take care of their business. If you understand where the Midianites were, where the Gadites were, and where Ephraim and Manasseh and these areas were for. Then he went up there to Benuel, spoke to them, and they spoke to him the same way as the men of Succoth. So he also spoke to the men of Penuel, saying, when I come back in peace, I will tear down this tower. Notice that Gideon, why do you keep on saying Gibeon? Gideon, a little bit of difference between the D and the B there. Gideon is telling them, we're going to finish this job. Only one reason, because he knows that God is able to do, and God has called him to do this. He's not moving out on his own fleshly, religious. No. He has a calling from God to take care of business. And that's what is pushing him to go out. And he's not saying, if I come back, he says, when I come back in peace. When the Lord is delivered. He knows that God's going to do it. Now, Zeba and Zalmunna were at Karkor, and their armies with them about 15,000. Watch again. How many people are with Gideon? How many people are with Gideon? 300. Zeba and Zalmunna have 15,000. You do the math. How many times does 300 go into 15,000? Look, a few times, All who were left of the army of the people of the east, for 120,000 men who drew the sword had fallen. So already 120,000 men have perished from the Midianites, but there's 15,000 left. Gideon only has 300 with him. Then, verse 11, Gideon went up by the road of those who dwell in the tents on the east of Nobah and Jokbehah, whatever that is, and he attacked the army while the camp felt secure. So he goes by this road. They were in their tents. They were feeling pretty secure. He attacked the army while the camp felt secure. So they had come in, they'd reestablished their camp, they ran away from Gideon. So many had already passed away, 120,000. So they set up camp and they feel like, hey, we've gotten away from that crazy guy named Gideon. When Zeba and Zalmunna fled, he pursued them. So what happens is that he attacks the army. And when he attacks the army, their leaders, remember those giants, remember those twin towers of the basketball team? Zeba and Zalmunna fled. What was it, Virginia Tech or something like that had the twin towers many years ago? University of Virginia. Zeba and Zalmunna fled. He pursued them. He took the two kings of Midian, Zeba and Zalmunna, and routed the whole army. So once again, God does something exceedingly abundantly above, and this army of 15,000 fell to 300 men. I don't know. I was never drafted. I never went to the army. I never went to Vietnam but 300 against 15,000? Who's going to get the glory for that? Study your history. Study your American history. Study the history of the Revolutionary War and find out how many times miracles, World War II, World War II, study how many times miracles happened in the middle of warfare. Pick up Derek Prince's book. What is it? Changing History or something like that through prayer and fasting. And he'll give you some events that he went through in Africa when he was in an answer to prayer. So Zebah and Zalmunna flee, and he pursues them. And he took the 2 kings of Midian and routed the whole army. Then Gideon, the son of Joash, returned from the battle from the Mount of Heres. And he caught a young man of the men of Succoth and interrogated him, and he wrote down for him the leaders of Succoth and its elders, 77 men. So here's what happened. Gideon came through the first time. They didn't want to help. He goes over there and he defeats the Midianites again. Now he takes Zebah and Zalmunna as captives, and he's coming back to Succoth, the town that didn't want to give him bread, one of the 2. And he finds a young man who was a resident of Succoth and say, hey, who are the big shots in your town? Who are the elders? Who are the leaders? And he probably, has to put the lights on him a little bit and blinds him and sits him down in there and, gives a little bit of extra pressure to interrogate him. And he says, who are the leaders? Well, I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? Tell us who. So he writes down for him the leaders, 77 men who are the leaders. Then he came to the men of Succoth and said, here are Zebah and Zalmunna, about whom you ridiculed me, saying, are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna now in your hand, that we should give bread to your weary man? Ladies and gentlemen, can we not help out a brother who God has anointed to do something, even if he's not part of our clan? Can we not pray at least for somebody? Can we not give? And all he was asking for was some bread. Always asking, hey man, can you feed us for a little while? We're tired. Can we not help somebody of our own family? Oh, they might not believe exactly like you believe. They might not, baptize the way that you baptize. But you have to realize that these were brothers. God saw them as one family. He saw them as Israel. Moses, Joshua, they would have seen them as one family. He says, here's Zebah and Zalmunna. Remember, about whom you ridiculed me, saying, are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna now in your hand, that we should give bread to your weary man? And he took the elders of the city and thorns of the wilderness and briars with them, and he taught the men of Succoth. And that doesn't mean that he had a Bible study either. He taught the men of Succoth. What did he do? I don't know. Some way or another, he got thorns and briars. I don't know. Maybe he led them through where the thorns were, and they got all scratched up and cut up and everything like that. I know. But it was time to teach them a lesson that hopefully that they would learn. He took the elders of the city, the thorns of the wilderness, and the briars, and with them he taught the men of Succoth. Then he tore down the tower of Penuel and killed the men of the city. So here's what happened. He had warned them. He goes out, gets Zebah and Zalmunna, and on the way back he takes care of business. He says, listen, you can't help me. God's going to bring judgment upon you. And he did. He tore down the tower of Penuel and killed the men of the city. And he said to Zebah and Zalmunna, what kind of men were they whom you killed at Tabor? So they answered, as you are, so were they. Each one resembled the son of a king. So he's finished business and taking care of a teaching lesson of Succoth and another one at Penuel. And I believe that this is going to be a lesson to all the other cities in that area and beyond throughout the land of Israel. That when it's time to help your brother, you help your brother. Don't let these little divisions separate us away. So he finished business there. He says to Zebah, what kind of men were they whom you killed at Tabor? Midianites had gone in. Remember, Midianites had been coming in over the Jordan and terrorizing Israel for years. And they answered Gideon by saying, as you are, so were they. Each one resembled the son of a king. And I think what they're trying to do is butter him up. Because Gideon, when we first introduced Gideon, he was no son of a king. Just an everyday regular guy that was threshing in the wine press. And catch that part of the program, about Wednesday or Thursday's program. Oh, they were big shots like you. Oh, I think they're just trying to butter them up a little bit. Then he said, they were my brothers, the sons of my mother. And as Yahweh lives, if you had let them live, I would not kill you. And he said to Jether, his firstborn, rise, kill them. So he says, who were those guys that you killed? Oh, the guys looked just like you. You know, they combed their hair like you. They shaved their beard like you. They wore clothes like you. And they were my brothers, man. They were my real brothers, sons of my mother. If you would have let them live, he says, I would not kill you. So he goes to Jether, his firstborn. He says, rise, kill them. But the youth would not draw his sword, for he was afraid because he was still a youth. I mean, his son Jether is with him, but still a little, as we say, wet behind the ears, whatever that means. Rise, kill them. But he wouldn't. He was afraid. It was a little bit too much for him. So Zebah and Zalmunna said, rise yourself and kill us, for as a man is, so is his strength. He says, if you're man enough, you do it. Why are you calling your son to do the job? If you're a big shot, if you're the man that you say you are, you kill us. Now they're confronting him. So Gideon arose, killed Zebah and Zalmunna, took the crescent ornaments that were on their camels' necks. And he finishes business with Zebah and Zalmunna, the same way they had finished business when he came against them initially with the 315,000 had died. Then the leftovers take care of business on the other side. I think my numbers are wrong, but you know what I mean. He had taken. Now he kills Zebah and Zalmunna. And he takes the crescent ornaments that were on their camels' necks. Now, before you say, oh, yeah, these were Muslims. Muslims weren't going to come for thousands of years later. Muslims don't show up until about 800 A.D. So, don't think that, crescent ornaments, those were Muslims. Nah, not even close. Because I can get you somewhat of a timestamp from here and say that Joseph Benson tells us that this was about 1249 years BC. So we're going to see Muslims for about another 2,000 years. Just to throw that out over there. Crescent ornaments. Oh, yeah, they were followers of Muhammad. No, they weren't. Then maybe they were precursors of something that was going to come down the line, the crescent and all that stuff. But all it tells us there is that Gideon killed them, and he took the crescent ornaments that were on their camels' necks. So that's his trophy. They were probably made out of gold or something like that, just guessing. Maybe they were made out of gold or something like that, and Gideon takes them off. Little trophies of war. Something you hang on your wall or put on the mantle of the fireplace. Then the men of Israel said to Gideon, rule over us, both you and your son and your grandson also, for you have delivered us from the hand of Midian. So Israel comes to him now and says, hey, thanks, man. You really been helping us out a lot. This is going good. We love you. We love what God is doing with you, man. That is so cool, dude. Come and rule over us, and we'll sign a contract with you that your son and your grandsons will be our king. You can rule over us. Well, look at Gideon's response. Verse 23. Gideon said to them, I will not rule over you, nor now shall my son rule over you. Yahweh shall rule over you. Now, I don't know how you feel about this, but I have access to the 8th chapter of the book of 1 Samuel, where Israel is going to ask for an earthly king, and Samuel is not going to be happy about it, and God is not going to be happy about it, but he's going to give it to him anyway. And it seems like Gideon has some insight there, saying, instead of us ruling over you, why don't we just let God rule over us? I kind of love that response. I kind of love the way that he's coming from. Gideon said to them, I will not rule over you, nor shall my son rule over you, and the Lord shall rule over you. We're going to find out what's going to happen to the sons and the sons' sons here pretty soon. Then Gideon said to them, I would like to make a request of you, that each of you would give me the earrings from his plunder, for they had golden earrings because they were Ishmaelites. Okay, now we find out about some of these people from Midian, that they were descendants of Ishmael. But he says, hey, I don't want to be your king. I don't want to rule over you. He says, but hey, what would happen if I would ask you for the earrings, all the plunder that you got, if you would just give me the earrings of the men? So they answered, we will gladly give them. And they spread out a garment, and each man threw into it the earrings from his plunder. The weight of the gold earrings that he requested was 1,700 shekels of gold. So now we have a big old gold. He says, I don't want to be a king. How about if you pay a little tithe to
is what I long for. Holiness is what I need. Holiness, holiness is what you want from Holiness, holiness is what I long for. Holiness is what I need. Holiness, holiness is what you want from me. So take my heart and hold it. Take my mind and transform it. Take my will conform it to yours, Righteousness, righteousness is what I long for. Righteousness is what I need. Righteousness, righteousness is what you want from me. Yeah, yeah. Take my heart and hold it. Take my mind and transform it. Take my will, conform it to yours, Lord. Brokenness, brokenness is what I long for. Brokenness is what I need. Yeah, yeah. Brokenness, brokenness is what you want from me. Yeah, yeah. Holiness, holiness is what you want from me. It's what you want from me.
Got underway at 7 o'clock in the morning on this Monday, the 10th day of January. This is my life. This is the life Cornerstone Church. Every morning, Monday through Friday, we're here. Also, we're here with a prayer line for you between 6 and 8 o'clock in the morning. Today's number, if you want to get some prayer or to share the good things that God is doing with you, a little praise report, 505-425-3717 is the number. Let me see what the current temperature is outside. I need to refresh the screen. 16 degrees. Feels like 12 out there right now with a 3-mile-an-hour breeze that we have blowing. Anyway, a little cold. It was wind chill of 10 degrees at 5:30 this morning. Full weather report for you at the bottom of the hour. We want to say thank you. Oh, Isabel is with us this morning. Joe and Flo is with us. Andrea and Tommy. Debbie's with us. Chana, as always. Chana, faithful as could be. Let's see. Darlene. Okay. Thanks, everybody, for hanging with us. And there's your prayer line number. We're taking it off the screen right now. But for the radio people, 425-3717 is the number. We're going back to the book of Judges, chapter 8. So, what is Gideon doing here? What the heck is Gideon? I would like to make a request of you, that each of you would give me the earrings from his plunder, for they had golden earrings because they were Ishmaelites. And they answered, we will gladly give them. They spread out a garment. Each man threw into it the earrings from his plunder. Now the weight of the gold earrings that he requested was 1,700 shekels of gold, besides the crescent ornaments, pendants, and purple robes which are on the kings of Midian, and besides the chains that were around their camels' necks. So these guys decorated even their, they had chrome rims and, mags and all that stuff on their cars, the camels, hey, come on. So you understand what I mean, dingle balls, the whole thing. And all he says, listen, you got the pendants and you got the crescent ornaments, and all I'm asking you is just the gold earrings. So they throw them into a blanket. Everybody passes by. They throw it in there, and it's an offering. What's Gideon? What's Gideon doing? Gideon trying to, take tithes for himself? Is Gideon, he's not a priest. We know that he's not of the tribe of Levi. What does Gideon do? So Gideon made into it an ephod and set it up in his city, Ophrah. So what's an ephod? Ephod was like a vest. Okay, it was an ephod. Remember when we were looking at the design of the tabernacle, the furniture, and the priest robes, and the ephod was that one piece of the garment that was going to go over their shoulders, and it was going to have a pocket in it, and the Urim and the Thurim was going to be in there that they were going to use to determine the will of the Lord. One way that they were going to use to see what God's will was. So, what does Gideon do? He makes a ephod out of the gold. Once again, it's like a vest. It's like a, this isn't a tower, or it's just a vest that he makes. Gideon made it into an ephod, set it up in the city Ophrah, and all Israel played the harlot with it there. You know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of the serpent in the wilderness. Remember when God told Moses there was a plague in the land because of the sin of the covenant people? There was a plague in the land. and sickness was going all around those who were in the wilderness with Moses. And God said, you make a brazen serpent, you bring it on a pole, and you lift it up, and everybody that looks at the brazen serpent are going to be healed. They're going to be protected from the plague that was in the land. And what happened is that they saved the brazen serpent, and people began to worship until somebody had to come somewhere down the line and destroy it, because the people had turned it from what it was supposed to be into something that it wasn't. This is the same thing in the time of Gideon. All he does, he makes an ephod and he sets it up. This is a symbol of what God has done amongst us. And we use the gold earrings of our enemies to make this ephod, and just as a memorial. Oh, he could have made a tower. He could have made, I don't know what else he could have made out of a bunch of gold. All kinds of things I guess he could have made out of the gold. But he makes this ephod. But then Israel played the harlot. Always looking for something that's always looking. Okay, let's slow down, Mr. Saiz. Don't get too mad at the people of Oprah. Always looking for something. Just what can we idolize? Israel played the harlot with their. So instead of it, that's why graven images and all this stuff, God is always against this stuff in our experience with him, because what we do is we get our eye on the physical thing and get our eye off of the supernatural. The God who is amongst them. All it was a memorial that God had defeated Oreb and Zeeb and Zalmunna and all these guys and the Midianites and what he had done and everything. Just there's a story behind it, and the people use it as a place of worship, and they're worshiping the created thing instead of the Creator himself. Romans chapter 1. All Israel played the harlot with it there. It became a snare to Gideon and to his house. Thus Midian was subdued before the children of Israel, so that they lifted their heads no more, and the country was quiet for 40 years in the days of Gideon. So the Midianites who had been coming over and terrorizing Israel had been taken care of. Okay? They were subdued. They lifted their heads no more. The country was quiet for 40 years in the days of Gideon. Why? It's because the people had gotten tired of what the Midianites were doing to them, along with the people of the east and the Amalekites. And they cried out to the Lord, and now we see the end of another cycle. Now they're back in peace again in the days of Gideon for 40 years. Then, verse 29, Jerubbaal, the son of Joash, went and dwelt in his own house. Who is Jerubbaal? Who is this guy? Well, remember, it was the nickname that was given to him by his father. Whose father? Gideon's father. So you see the name Jerubbaal there? It's Gideon, okay? Maybe his middle name now or something like that, but it's kind of a nickname. And remember, let Baal contend for himself. And we use the name here in the 29th verse to remind us that Baal was not able to contend for himself, that the Baal principality that those tribes in the north had been worshiping, along with the Midianites, the Amalekites, and those of the east, had been bound and tied up. And now for 40 years we have peace. Then Jerubbaal the son of Joash went and dwelt in his own house. And Jerubbaal / Gideon. Gideon had 70 sons who were his own offspring, for he had many wives. I won't touch that anymore. We'll just leave it the way it is. And his concubine, who was in Shechem, also bore him a son, whose name he called Abimelech. So he had a son he had many wives, and then he's got a concubine off in the city, off to the side someplace, in Shechem, and the son's name was Abimelech. Now Gideon, the son of Joash, died at a good old age and was buried in the tomb of Joash his father in Ophrah of the Abiezerites. Okay, remember the Abiezerites, their grapes weren't as good as those that were in Ephraim. The best of Abiezerites weren't as good as let's pacify those dudes. So it was, verse 33, as soon as Gideon was dead, that the children of Israel again played the harlot with the Baals and made Baal Berith their god. What do you mean? What do you mean? You're kidding me. No. We're not kidding you. Now, let's look at what it says specifically in verse 33 about this idolatry. They played the harlot with the Baals and made Baal Berith. Berith means covenant. So they're saying Baal is the covenant maker. No. Baal isn't the covenant. Baal is the covenant breaker. But now that Gideon isn't around, notice how leadership, the people for 40 years, are free from their enemies. Now what they're doing is they're kicking the back door open. And they're calling Baal, who is a principality, demon god, their covenant. Thus the children of Israel did not remember Yahweh, their God, who had delivered them from the hands of all the enemies on every side, nor did they show kindness to the house of Jerubbaal Gideon in accordance with the good he had done for Israel. They forgot what Yahweh had done for them the minute Gideon's not around anymore. And they did not show kindness to the house of Gideon, Jerubbaal, in accordance with the good. So yeah. That was yesterday, baby. That's old news. How about today? Then Abimelech, and what Gideon had done, he had left a legacy, and the people are stepping all over it. The legacy, remember, they wanted to make him king and his son and his grandson. He says, no, we're not going to have anything to do with that. Yahweh is your king. Serve him. That didn't last, much longer than 40 years. In fact, even before that, they were having problems with the ephod that it had made. Us human beings, ladies and gentlemen, oh my God. Then, verse 1, chapter 9. Then Abimelech, the son of Jerubbaal, went to Shechem, to his mother's brothers, and spoke with them and all the family of the house with his father's mother, saying, please speak in the hearing of all the men of Shechem, which is better for you, that all 70 of the sons of Jerubbaal reign over you, or that one reign over you. Remember that I am your own flesh and blood. So we were introduced to Abimelech, the last few verses of the 8th chapter, son of one of Gideon's concubines. He goes to Shechem, to his mother's brothers, and spoke with them and with all the family of the house of his mother's father, saying, please speak in the hearing of all the many of Shechem, which is better for you. He says, listen. What's better for you guys? Is it you have 70 rulers or you have one ruler? We're going to have 70 ideas and 70 plans, 70 theories of how we should all, or just one. And he says, I don't see anybody rising up. And remember, I'm a son of Gideon. I am your own flesh and blood. And his mother's brothers spoke all these words concerning him in the hearing of all the men of Shechem. So the other 70 who hadn't taken up any leadership, they just, living the life that had been left to him by their father Gideon. And so they go to the men of Shechem, and their heart was inclined to follow Abimelech, for they said, he is our brother. So they go to the town leaders, and they say, hey, I think this guy's got a good idea. I think he is our brother, and And so they gave him 70 shekels of silver from the temple of Baal Berith, with which Abimelech hired worthless and reckless men, and they followed him. So they give him 70 shekels of silver, and Abimelech goes and starts his own little army. Get some of the guys who just come out of prison. Get some guys that were hanging around, the homeless shelter. Say, hey, dude, you guys want a job? Let's go do some. Let's go tear it up a little bit. Then he went, and I could think of some other things about these worthless and reckless men that follow Abimelech. Probably offered him, today we would say, hey, dude, good. The drinks are on me. Free drugs. We're gonna. Then he went to his father's house at Ophrah, killed his brothers and 70 sons of Jerubbaal on one stone, but Jotham, the youngest son of Jerubbaal, was left because he hid himself. Notice how they're using the name Jerubbaal instead of Gideon in this portion of the scripture, and it's there for a reason. He went to his father's house, killed his brothers, the 70 sons of Jerubbaal, on one stone. And only one of them gets away, and his name is Jotham. Kind of remember that name. With Abimelech and Jotham. The youngest son, probably the smallest of the whole bunch, maybe still a young kid, maybe was able to hide underneath the kitchen sink or something like that. But Jotham, the youngest son of Jerubbaal, was left because he hid himself. Hey, we lost count. How many did we get? I think we got all 70 of them. Let's go home. Yeah, all these guys, they want to go home and go to their shooting range or something like that. And not with their 30-30s or their 45s. That's another shooting range. Verse 6 says, and the men of Shechem gathered together, all of them at Beth Milo, and they went and made Abimelech king besides the terebinth tree at the pillar that was in Shechem. Now everybody's afraid of him. Now everybody's afraid of Shechem. They make him king. Remember, Gideon had refused to be king. He didn't want his son or his grandson, and we have his son Abimelech and another one, Jotham, that are the only ones that are left because Abimelech has killed the rest. Now everybody says, I don't think we better mess around with this Abimelech. You're the king, yes. So, and their idolatry, immorality, everything going on. Same old story. Second verse, same as the first. Now when they told Jotham, he went and stood on the top of Mount Gerizim and lifted his voice and cried out. And he said to them, listen to me, you men of Shechem, that God may listen to you. Now let me tell you what, I think that Shechem is going to be the only voice of reason in all this story that's going on. I think that he's going to be the only guy with, but let's find out. Let's see how much time we have that we can spend a little bit more time in here before we turn it off. I don't know if we're going to be able to finish off this portion of the story. Listen to me, you men of Shechem, that God may listen to you. The trees once went forth to anoint a king over them. They said to the olive tree, reign over us. The olive tree said to them, should I cease giving my oil, with which they honor God and men, and go to sway over the trees? The tree said to the fig tree, you come and reign over us. But the fig tree said to them, should I cease my sweetness and my good fruit, and go to sway over the trees? The tree said to the vine, you come and reign over us. But the vine said to them, should I cease my new wine, with which cheers both God and men, and go to sway over the trees? And all the trees said to the bramble, you come and reign over us. And the bramble said to the trees, if in truth you anoint me as your king, then come and take shelter in my shade. If not, let fire come out of the bramble and devour the cedars of Lebanon. So Jotham comes to the leadership with a little bit of a parable. Comes to them, well, hey, one time all the trees came to the olive tree and said, you be the king. Same way that they came to his father. He says, you be our king. But the olive tree said to them, I got other things to do, man. I got oil and I honor God. That's my purpose. My purpose isn't to be king over the trees. My purpose, God-given purpose, give oil. They come to the fig tree, the fruit tree. First of all, the anointed tree. Then they come to the fruit tree, the fig tree. Tell you reign over us. The fig tree says, no, that's not my purpose, man. Remember, they had asked for Gideon and for his son and for his son's son, the grandson of Gideon, to be their king. All of them refused, including the vine. Now the vine said, that's not my purpose. Then all the trees said to the bramble, what is the bramble? The bramble is the weeds, man. The bramble grows all over the place. You don't have to nurture the bramble bush. It just kind of grows all by itself. It's like a tumbleweed. It's always going to be there. You got to keep on cutting them back. Unlike the vine, unlike the fig tree, unlike the olive tree that you have to watch over and prune them and watch them. No, the bramble just grows all over the place. Here's what Jotham is telling them. You guys have picked the weed. You have picked the thorns to be your boss, Abimelech. He was the son of the concubine. Yeah, he was half brother, but he was the son of the concubine. Just some girlfriend that he had every once in a while whenever he went to that part of the country. Kind of like some of these truck drivers, I love truck drivers, don't get me wrong. Now all the truck drivers are going to be mad at me, especially their wives. The bramble said to the trees, if in truth you anoint me as your king over you, then come and take shelter in my shade. If not, let fire come out of the bramble and devour. Now therefore, if you have acted in truth and sincerity in making Abimelech king, then you have dealt with Jerubbaal and his house and have done to him as he deserves. For my father fought for you, risked his life, and delivered you out of the hand of Midian. Therefore, he says, if you're doing this in truth and sincerity, and if you have dealt well with Jerubbaal and his house, you have done to him what he deserves. Is this what my father would have wanted? Is this what Gideon would have wanted? For you to pick this guy from out over there? He's not even from our town. No, but we're afraid of him. We gave him 70 shekels, and he has his little gang. Hello, little gang bangers over there. For my father fought for you, risked his life, and delivered us. But if you have risen up against my father's house this day and killed his 70 sons on one stone and made Abimelech the son of a female servant king over the men of Shechem, because he is your brother, if then you have acted in truth and sincerity with Jerubbaal in the house this day, then rejoice in Abimelech and let him rejoice over you. If not, he says, let the fire come from Abimelech and devour the men of Shechem and Beth Millo, and let fire come from the men of Shechem and from Beth Millo and devour Abimelech. And Jotham ran away and fled, and he went to Beer and dwelt there for fear of Abimelech his brother. So I think we could kind of figure this out pretty well. Think we can figure out pretty well what he's trying to say, and tomorrow we will continue the story and we'll answer some of those questions if the Holy Spirit hasn't answered them for you yet. So put your bookmark there on the 22nd verse of the 9th chapter of the book of Judges. Don't forget, prayer line is still open at 505-425-3717.